The Lord be with you.
and with your spirit.
From the Holy Gospel according to St. John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, neither he nor his parents sinned. It is so that the works of God might be made visible through him. We have to do the works of the one who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva and smeared the clay on his eyes and said to him, go, wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he went and washed and came back able to see. His neighbors and those who had seen him earlier as a beggar said, isn't this the one who used to sit and beg? Some said, it is. But others said, no, he just looks like him. He said, I am. So they said to him, how were your eyes opened? He replied, the man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and told me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went there and washed and was able to see. And they said to him, where is he? He said, I don't know. They brought the one who was once blind to the Pharisees. Now Jesus had made clay and opened his eyes on a Sabbath. So then the Pharisees also asked him how he was able to see. He said to them, he put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and now I can see. So some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath. But others said, how can a sinful man do such signs? And there was a division among them. So they said to the blind man again, what do you have to say about him, since he opened your eyes? He said, he is a prophet. Now the Jews did not believe that he had been blind and gained his sight until they summoned the parents of the one who had gained his sight. They asked them, is this your son, who you say was born blind? How does he now see? His parents answered and said, we know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. We do not know how he sees now, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He can speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone acknowledged him as the Christ, he would be expelled from the synagogue. For this reason, his parents said, he is of age, question him. So a second time, they called the man who had been blind and said to him, give God the praise. We know that this man is a sinner. He replied, if he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know is that I was blind and now I see. So they said to him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered them, I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? They ridiculed him and said, you are that man's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but we do not know where this one is from. The man answered and said to them, this is what is so amazing, that you do not know where he is from. Yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if one is devout and does his will, he listens to him. It is unheard of that anyone ever opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he would not be able to do anything. They answered and said to him, you were born totally in sin, and are you now trying to teach us? Then they threw him out. When Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, he found him and said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered and said, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "I do believe, Lord." And he worshiped him. Then Jesus said, "I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see might see, and those who do see might become blind." Some of the Pharisees who were with him heard this and said to them, "Surely we are not also blind, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you are saying, 'We see,' so your sin remains." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Please be seated.
The Gospel reading revolves around the story of the man born blind that was cured by Jesus. But how many blind men can we find in the Gospel reading? Most of us would obviously say, of course, there is only one. But actually, there are many of them, though only one was cured. The first group of blind people in the gospel is the group of the disciples. The disciples' eyes were widely opened. They saw the blind man. They asked all sorts of questions, except the most essential question, and that is, how can they help the blind man? But brothers and sisters, isn't that also our usual reaction? Surrounded with poverty, we merely ask, whose fault is this? Why are they poor? Why are they starving? And we can ask all the why questions about poverty, suffering, and unhappiness, and even find answers to this intellectually. But after that, what? The mark of holiness is when we can ask, how can I help my brother and sister in need? The disciples were also blind because they could not see how they could help the blind man. The second group of blind people in the gospel comprise of the parents and relatives of the blind man. They were given the opportunity to testify, but they refused to give witness of his cure to other people for fear that they will be expelled from the synagogue by the Pharisees, that they could not speak up and say, he was cured by Jesus Christ. That these people, they were faint-hearted people, afraid of the consequences for telling the truth. And so they were blinded by cowardice and fear. And the third group of blind people in the gospel is the group of the Pharisees. They have heard the testimony of the witnesses. They have summoned the parents of the man born blind, and they have heard the testimony of the man, the blind man cured by Jesus. But they refuse to acknowledge that Jesus had performed the miracle of restoring the sight of the blind man. They could not accept Jesus. They could not believe in him because of their biases, because of their prejudices. Therefore, they are blind to the truth before their eyes, that they stuck to their goal to disprove the divinity of Jesus, and they were not open to any proof of Christ's divinity. And the fourth blind man in the gospel is the one cured by Jesus. He had faith. Although physically blind, but he could see. He could not see with his eyes, but he could see with his heart. The other three groups, the disciples, the parents and the relatives of the blind man, and the Pharisees, they could see with their eyes, but they could not see with their heart because they are blinded by their biases, prejudices, cowardice, fear, and own selfish concern. In other words, today's gospel tells us about two different kinds of blindness: the physical blindness and the spiritual one. And we can have good physical eyesight and very bad spiritual sight. And in fact, the eyes of our body have become ultra powerful with the use of modern science. We now have microscope to see tiny things. We do have telescope to see distant stars and planets. But how often we fail to see the person next to us. We can now see the inside of the human body through X-ray, MRI, endoscopy, or ultrasound. But we do not see the inner goodness and beauty of every human being, that the eyes of our soul remain weak and dim. And this is the fruit of what we call unbridled or untamed materialism and egoism that affected the entire humanity, that our selfish obsession for material goods has resulted to the erosion of our value system and the distortion of our priorities. We now live in a strange time. We want to work faster in order to save time. And so people came up with supersonic jet, bullet trains, and all sorts of high-tech appliances and gadgets. But we still rush and run out of time. We want to improve, or we want to have a better communication with people. And so we came up with internet and smartphones. And yet we spend more time scrolling our phones, surfing the internets, than having meaningful conversation with our family and loved ones. We know a lot. We know many updates about local and Hollywood celebrities and stars, but we do not know the names of our next door neighbors. We build bigger houses, but we want small families. We have more food, but less nutrition. We have more experts, but more problems. We have more medicines, but more incurable disease. We have more leisure, but less fun. In other words, we have more of many things, but less in what is truly important. In short, we are blind to what really matters most in life. That is why we are always running after things that are not really essentials. And in the process, we get lost, confused, and disoriented. And what must we do? We need to figuratively close our eyes. When we close our eyes, we do not distracted to the trivial things and can focus ourselves on the things that are truly important and essentials. Once, a young and very attractive nurse consults the doctor. She said, "Doc, can I give this young man a sedative? Because every time he sees me, he gets excited. And when I take his pulse, it gets faster." And the doctor replies, "No, You don't have to give him sedatives. Give him a blindfold. Sometimes we need to be blindfolded in order to appreciate the value of the gift of sight and the beauty of light. We need to be blind in order to regain our spiritual eyesight. Sometimes we need to lose the non-essentials in order to focus on the essentials. Brothers and sisters, the season of Lent invites us to close our eyes to the distraction of this world and to the countless non-essentials in life. We are invited to look at ourselves, examine our values and the directions in life. And like the blind man in today's gospel, we may fix our gaze on Jesus alone, who is the source of our true happiness and life. And in Jesus, we can never get lost because He is the way. In Jesus, we will never live in darkness because He is the truth. With Jesus, we can overcome death because He is the life who offers us the gift of everlasting life. When times seem confusing, uncertain, and dark, let us call to mind the words of Jesus in the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 12, when He said, I am the light of the world, and whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, and he will have the light of life.